Why the need for hazmat training? You're a professional driver, right? Why is transporting one type of material any different than another? After all, materials of all types, hazardous and non-hazardous, are transported safely throughout the world all day, every day. Well, this program is more than a review of hazardous materials. It's actually more about security and what you can do to help ensure your safety, the safety of your cargo, and the safety of our country. That's right. Some of the materials you transport, if in the wrong hands, can and have been used for evil and destructive purposes. Nobody wants that to happen. Besides talking about what you need to be aware of and do when transporting hazardous materials, we'll also discuss some of the precautions your company should be taking in both the transporting, storing, and handling of hazardous materials. In order to help protect U.S. citizens, the Department of Transportation, or DOT, has revised its regulations requiring all companies that transport or cause the transportation of hazardous materials to provide security awareness training to everyone involved in the transportation of hazardous materials, from the manufacturing and testing of shipping containers to the unloading of the materials at their final destination. This program was designed to ensure compliance with regulations and to help inform you about security risks involved in handling and transporting hazardous materials, methods of enhancing hazmat security, how to recognize potential security threats, specific actions to take during a security breach or attack. It is not meant to be a detailed training course of specific DOT regulations and criteria. You'll receive additional site-specific training detailing procedures at your facility, and it's more important that you know and understand this information. So, what do you need to know as a professional driver transporting hazardous materials? You should know what hazardous materials are stored at your facility and those transported to and from your facility. You also need to know which of these substances could be used as weapons. Potentially dangerous materials include flammables, explosives, corrosives, reactive substances, and materials that are toxic to people or the environment. The DOT Emergency Response Guidebook can help identify the characteristics and hazards related to materials in your facility. By referring to the green section, it is easy to see how one of these substances could threaten the health and welfare of an entire community. If your company handles biological materials or infectious wastes, you'll also need to determine if these substances could be used as weapons. The first tip is to schedule several smaller deliveries of hazardous materials rather than one large delivery. This limits the quantity that could be stolen at any one time and reduces the likelihood that a single shipment could be used as a weapon of mass destruction. However, the size of the shipment stolen doesn't affect its potential danger. Any amount of missing hazardous materials must be reported to the proper authorities. But why? This one shipment may be seemingly insignificant, but also may be a small piece that fits into a larger puzzle. Don't try to determine that yourself. Report any missing or stolen hazardous materials immediately. Drivers should also pay attention to who is receiving their shipment, especially new customers. Red flags include last-minute shipments requiring rush processing, customers' lack of knowledge about the proper use of a material, delivery to an unusual location, observation of apparent stockpiles of other shipments of hazardous materials, especially materials not normally used together, refusal to sign for a shipment, or to show photo identification and an offer of a cash payment or bribe to deliver a shipment. If there are any concerns that someone may use hazardous materials to carry out a terrorist attack, law enforcement personnel should be contacted immediately. Don't wait. Don't guess. Don't ignore a suspicion. Report it immediately. Before leaving a facility, drivers should perform a pre-trip inspection to make sure the shipment is secure and the truck is in proper working order. A truck broken down on the side of a highway is an easy target. Hazardous materials packages should be secured in a transport vehicle to prevent damage during transportation. If the hazardous materials leaks or spills during transport due to insufficient blocking and bracing, the motor carrier is at fault. Make sure trailer doors are locked. It's also a good idea to use security seals on truck doors so it's easy to see if anybody has tampered with the load. If hazardous materials are transported in a vehicle that has an open bed, like a pickup truck, they should be chained down. Small quantities can be locked inside of an equipment chest. Each bulk packaging, freight container, unit load device, transport vehicle, or rail car containing any quantity of hazardous materials must have a placard on each side and each end. Once a shipment of hazardous materials has left your facility, security of the shipment becomes the driver's responsibility. The route that a shipment takes should be as short as possible. Times and routes should be changed to avoid constructing a recognizable pattern someone can use to plan a hijacking. Be sure you have enough fuel so you don't have to stop en route to your destination. Plan your route and legal driving time to be able to go directly from origin to destination without any unnecessary stops. Drivers should check in with the dispatcher frequently to inform them of any delays, detours, or stops that need to be made. But specifics about the loads and details about the routes should never be discussed over CB radios or cell phones. Remember, a parked vehicle is an easier target over a vehicle in motion. Be extra cautious when parking for fuel, meals, or rest. Pick public areas and areas that are well lit. Always lock your truck and perform another quick walk-around inspection upon returning to the truck. If a driver thinks they are being followed by another vehicle, call 911. Remember, terrorists are always looking for new ways to spread destruction. Hazardous materials fit this description. Now think about it. If you could choose between just another day on the road and a devastating terrorist attack, which would you choose? Of course, you can make a difference. So you may have a preconceived notion about what a terrorist looks like. Is that what you should be on the lookout for? Probably not. Terrorists are trained not to be obvious and will try not to fit into preconceived categories. But deterring and preventing terrorism isn't a whole lot different than deterring and preventing other types of crime. How? Well, how about starting internally? That's right. Threats may come from within. Employees have knowledge of a facility's layout and security procedures and may even have access to sensitive areas. So a misguided worker can pose an extremely serious threat. Background checks of new employees should be standard procedure. Other measures may include conducting spot checks of personal vehicles and lockers, having visitors show identification and sign in, and accompanying visitors while they are at the facility. If your facility uses other companies to transport hazardous materials, the security measures that they have in place should also be checked regularly. But threats aren't always something we can see. Terrorists can intercept emails, so confidential information shouldn't be sent over any computer network unless the message can be encrypted. And files that detail your company's security measures should only be stored on computers that are protected by firewalls. Don't discuss sensitive information on cell phones because it's possible for a terrorist to eavesdrop on your conversation. And never discuss the hazardous materials that are handled at your facility or your facility's security measures in public. You don't know who may be listening. Once the hazardous materials in your facility that could be targeted by terrorists are identified, you'll need to attempt to foresee or predict how a possible security breach or attack might take place. Protecting an entire facility may be easier than protecting individual shipments of hazardous materials. Fencing, walls, bright lights, security cameras, and alarm systems can do a lot to prevent unauthorized access. If possible, your facility should have one well-guarded access way, and parking for visitors should be well away from hazardous material storage areas. Of course, these safeguards do little to protect your facility if procedures aren't followed. To make sure no one leaves a gate open or fails to set an alarm, proper training is vital. But what about the actual hazardous materials on site? They must be secured, locked in storage rooms, fenced-in areas, or separate high-security buildings. Valves on tanks and storage vats should be secured as well. Using a sign-out system for keys to restricted areas and performing frequent inspections to make sure no one has tampered with locks or other security equipment should also be conducted. These steps can help make your facility secure. But once a shipment leaves the yard, then what happens? Security doesn't end once hazardous materials arrive at their destination. If a delivery is not expected, the carrier that sent them should be immediately contacted to verify the shipment is legitimate. Before a shipment is unloaded, its shipping papers must be checked and the vehicle and its cargo thoroughly inspected. Containers should be closely examined for signs of damage and tampering. Workers should also be on the lookout for any unusual containers, as well as containers that are improperly labeled or that don't match the description in the shipping papers. Special attention should be given to shipments that enter the United States from other countries, since there might not have been much security at their points of origin. If the origins of a container are questionable or it's damaged in any way, it should be refused. Any evidence of tampering or theft should be reported to management so that they can contact law enforcement. Warehouse doors should be closed immediately after a shipment has been unloaded. The threat is real, but it doesn't mean attacks are inevitable. Plans can be disrupted. Attacks can be prevented. Know what and how much hazardous materials your company stores, handles, and transports. Your facility and hazardous materials must be secured at all times. Question any unusual orders or shipments. Select delivery routes carefully to minimize opportunities for theft, hijacking, or sabotage. Inspect all incoming deliveries. Most of all, report any suspicious activity to management or law enforcement. They are trained in how to respond to these matters. We all need to take responsibility for the safety of our workplace, our roads, and our country. Hazardous materials security is just a small part of this overall responsibility, but it's one that must be taken seriously. Do your part. Make a difference.